want to talk to you today about who is your neighbor. But I'm going to talk about who my neighbor is, and hopefully you're going to think about who your neighbor is by learning about my neighbors today. Because see, this question of who are our neighbors continues from the musings of the ancients all the way up until today. Just as the parable of the Good Samaritan suggests, my being clergy does not make my relationship with my neighbors any less complicated. Right, Sister Allison? Yes, Sister Allison. Not very long ago, I want you to know that a sign appeared on my neighbor's lawn, pushed up against the chain link fence for outward display to the road. It had two praying hands in the upper right-hand corner, and it read, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven." First they gotta turn from their wicked ways, and then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. 2 Chronicles 7:14, for those of you with your Bibles open and ready. Now, it had me wondering, with this heat and all, I'm clear that our garden didn't produce this year, so our land could use a little healing. So I thought maybe he was talking about, the land that we live on. And my gut tells me that some of the churches that my neighbors attend would likely consider Jill and I to be a little wicked. So maybe it was aimed at us, I thought. Could be. Now, I'm also not sure, though, whether we would be considered by their church to be God's people. It starts off, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves." So I'm not sure we even fit in that category in the first place. So maybe the sign's not directed at me at all. But here's the thing. In Luke, we are told that a man came to Jesus and asked, "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You've answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And so who is my neighbor?" asked the man. And the response was the Good Samaritan. The story of the Good Samaritan, where the priest and the Levite and the Samaritan, which one do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell in the hands of the robbers? Was it the priest? No. Was it the Levite? No. It was the Samaritan, the least likely among those, right? And the expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him was the one who was the neighbor." And Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." You see, we are asked to stretch our idea of neighbor beyond nearby, beyond geography, and beyond like-mindedness. Beyond like-mindedness. Jill taught a class, a philosophy class actually, and she did a whole unit around ethics on who is your neighbor. And one of her very, very prominent Christian students, who I also taught, on that unit of who is your neighbor, she said she went home and she talked to her dad, and she said, "Dad, I want to know what you think. What do the scriptures teach us about who is my neighbor?" And her father said that back in the biblical times, people only hung out with people who were like them, so your neighbor was just people who were like you. Not only missed the whole point of the parable, but encouraged his daughter basically to only stick to people who were like you, right? I mean, that was the point. Very frightening. Very frightening. So we're asked to stretch our idea of neighbor beyond geography, beyond like-mindedness. See, in order to be a good neighbor, we are to show mercy not just to those who are like us. Now, I'm sure I've mentioned before, but we live on a gravel road. There are only 9 houses off of our road from the main street, and the road dead ends at the river. So there is only one way in and one way out. So the great thing about this is that everybody keeps an eye out for everyone else. And the complicated thing about this is that everybody keeps an eye on everybody else. They know when you're getting a package, they know when you're having company, they know when you're remodeling your bathroom. So this one-way road of 8 or 9 families is not a very large market for religious messaging. Well, so I began to think that this sign might be pointed at me and my family. But the reality is, for the most part, everyone has been really welcoming in our little neighborhood. We mostly keep the conversation to the river and the wildlife, road repair, because we all have to pool our money to fix the gravel road, phone service, because it's terrible where we live, and lawn care, very important. Now, we've shared a beer with a few neighbors. We've gifted some homemade jalapeno jam to some neighbors. It's good, isn't it, David? I know. Yes. We gifted that jalapeno jam for some house repair help. And we've also taken a plate of Christmas dinner over to a neighbor who was home alone for the holidays. So it goes, though, pretty much without saying that Jill and I are likely the most liberal people that these folks have ever met. The most socially liberal, the most politically liberal, and the most religiously liberal people that they have ever met. And I am glad and proud to represent. Thank you. But I can tell, you see, I can tell that my being a minister confuses them. But they don't push, and we don't talk religion. Now, I could also tell that our daughter's birth confused them even more. But they don't push, and we don't talk conception. But after Beckett was born, we all had something much safer to talk about. So you need to know, everybody's going to talk about a cute baby, right? So we had something to talk about. But the culture of our block is pretty clear. You see, what you do in your house is your business, almost to a detriment, right? I mean, almost to a detriment, because this is also the highest meth lab home area, by the way. Not my street, but that area, I'm just saying. So what you do in your house is your business, but you keep your lawn mowed. So my neighbor's biblical sign stopped me in my tracks enough to wonder who his audience was, right? I'm also sure he would find it very odd that I stood in front of his house and took a picture of it with my phone. But I did. Now, it's important for you to know that our block is rural, right? I mean, I live right west of the dam in Sand Springs. It's a rural area. I mean, you turn right on a horse farm. There's cows across the way. I mean, it's definitely rural. And it still has this small town quality about it. You see, our direct neighbors to the east actually sold us our home, and they grew up on the land that we now live on the land, yes. And in the house that's to the west of us, that's where he grew up. They built the house to the east of us, moved on up down the road to a nicer house. But see, his family owned almost all the property on the street, and over the last 50 years, his dad and then him consequently built homes and then parceled that land out to folks, primarily initially who they knew. So our neighbor to the east, though, you need to know, hadn't always owned our house. His father had sold the property to the woman who built the house, and when she moved later into nursing care, our house came up for sale at a time when my neighbor's friend was diagnosed with cancer and given 6 months to live. So see, before we bought that house, he bought it so that he could move his friend in, give him a beautiful place to live out the rest of his life next door to his friends, and to keep him close by so that all of the folks who knew him on our street could take care of him. See, they all went to school together since they were in kindergarten, and these are folks who are now in their 60s. That's neighborly. So when we bought our home, you can imagine we were definitely outsiders in lots of different ways. But we were welcomed into the mix with our love of the land and the river. But our neighbor with the sign was not one of the curious neighbors who introduced himself to us when we moved in. Now, here's what I know about that man who lives behind that fence after living down the street now for almost 4 years. This is what I know. He's in his 80s, and he still takes care of his own yard. I see him outside regularly weed eating near the fence line or watering the flowers of his neatly kept lawn. Our relationship would be what I would call here in Oklahoma cordial, which is one step below neighborly. Cordial. We might raise a hand to each other as we're going by, or he might stop for an instant from his watering to turn and give me a nod underneath his John Deere trucker hat, right? But my attempts to converse with him have not been met with any interest in a conversation. Cordial, one step below neighborly. So he has a trailer, and that's actually a nice trailer, that's been spiffied up with a 2-car garage and an added porch. And the side door entrance has a more recent addition of a makeshift wheelchair access ramp. Now, the other neighbors have told me that he takes care of his wife, who's been ill for a while now, and they also tell me that he's lived there for close to 50 years. Now, I'm fairly certain that they told me his name, but I don't remember it. Now, according to a current study by sociologist Keith Hampton, only about 25% of us know our neighbors' names. 25%. And 8% don't know any of their neighbors at all. So if you know your neighbors' names on both sides of you, pat yourself on the back. Because you're one of the small few. The small few. I'd love to do a study about how many Unitarians are the ones who know their Now, I grew up in Oklahoma during the height of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, of course, when the question was constantly being asked of, won't you be my neighbor? And Mr. Rogers taught me that everyone should be seen as neighbor and that we needed to deal with others sensibly and humanely, even when they are feeling differently or angry, or if we are. That is the scripture of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, who was a very smart man and a minister, you know. Now, I was taught that we needed to befriend our neighbors, and I knew my neighbors growing up in the Northwest neighborhood in Oklahoma City. My neighbors to the south of my childhood home became my godparents. My neighbor to the north used to invite me over for cookies, and I would help her out with her yard work. And my childhood neighbor down the street became my best friend when I was 2 and has been ever since. And I'm about to turn 40. But my neighborhood was more of a free-range stomping ground than kids have access to today. I was given this freedom to roam in the square mile between major city streets and could be gone all day long exploring on my bicycle or selling world's finest chocolate. As long as I was home before the streetlights came on. Right? And don't make my mama holler. Don't make my mama holler, and don't make her come after me neither, looking for me. Hollering outside of that car window. Don't do that. But our neighborhoods have changed, or at least we're led to believe that they have changed. But it is for certain that our way of responding to them has changed. Our daughter, Beckett, will not be able to roam the neighborhood until the streetlights come on. Because someone would probably call DHS, wouldn't they, Reverend Gerald? Not attending my child, just letting them run around, unsupervised. See, neighborhoods used to be the hub of activity, what sociologist Ray Oldenburg calls a third place, with block parties and potlucks and people streaming out in the streets and fire hydrants turned on and people playing stickball and, oh wait, what age am I? Okay. I'm back. But according to Oldenburg, the first place, there's 3 places, the first place is our home and the people with whom we live. Our second place is where we work and the place we spend the majority of our waking hours. But our third place is a public setting with regular, informal gatherings of people where we build community. It's a place to relax and have the opportunity to know and to be known by others. And there are lots of reasons why the neighborhood is no longer the focal point of our community building. It used to be that a home purchase was a lifelong commitment. But the job market and the economy have shaped our neighborhoods to be more transient. Air conditioning has driven us indoors. Many of you likely remember when we were driven outside on the porch to stay cool. Or our windows were open with fans in them so you could hear your neighbor's business, so you better be nice to them, and you better not scream loudly, because if you talk too loud and they hear you, you're in trouble. Also, automobile ownership and the nature of urban sprawl has kept many from walking in their neighborhood streets. And then, of course, there's technology. At the same time, technology has shrunk the world into just a click or a text or a Skype call away. At the same time, it makes the in-the-flesh contact more rare, creating this paradox of being so easily accessible. And at the same time, many of us are left with this feeling of isolation and relationally impoverished lives. Relationally impoverished lives. Now, online technology continues to attempt to recreate this small town experience. And when it focuses on connecting people in real life, it can, and I think it does succeed. Sites like Meetup, for example, help like-minded folks find each other in small areas where they would never even have that opportunity. And if you're incapable of getting out in person for real contact for whatever reason, online-only community is certainly better than none and has been a lifesaver for a lot of people. But there's this curious movement among the hipster generation, of which my brother, by the way, belongs. He's 26. And there's this curious movement among folks in his neck of the woods to unplug. He actually thinks that my Facebook engagement is somewhat archaic and merely feeding a consumerist, voyeuristic culture that keeps relationships at the surface. He also reads Kafka in his spare time. But there's still this whole group of folks who believe that that's impeding us from actually connecting instead of helping, and I can see places where he's right. So he's off Facebook, and he's off MySpace, and I can't even stalk him on LiveJournal anymore. So I have no idea what's going on in his life unless I call and actually have a conversation with him. Maybe he's right. But he's chosen to focus his connection time at the coffee shop, which has become not only his second place, but also his third place, because he works at Starbucks and hangs out there too. But see, every store is trying to be the next third place. Have you noticed Restoration Hardware's got like a living room? Even Quick Trip is putting little tables out in the front. Everybody's trying to make it a local hub, right? But today, third places, and you might have several third places in your life. They might be farmers markets or yoga classes or the gym. I've often said that the Whole Foods might actually need to be annexed by the church because it's definitely the spot where I see all of you during the week. I know better than to run in there with my ball cap on and my grungy shorts anymore. But what if the third place that we're talking about were the church? What if the third place were in fact the church? Local churches used to be neighborhood hubs, but churches have changed too. People drive to go to church. What if I told you from now on you had to go to a church within a 15-mile radius of your house? That probably wouldn't work for you, for many of you. Churches have changed. People drive to come to this church. Some people drive an hour or more to join us on Sunday morning. But church still seems like a good possibility to be a voluntary place of connection. Church aims at this kind of connection that can't be fabricated by a retail chain who connects people based on their purchase history. Church could be that third place, a place of choice where we deepen our connections, where we can talk about our values and about things that matter to us. And for many Oklahomans, that is true. Church is their third place, no matter what their theology, right? But how do we make friends and make connections? On my way home last week, as I pulled into our road, onto our gravel road, I noticed that there were 5 or 6 cars parked at my neighbor's trailer. Now, I'd never seen anyone parked out front of his house. He has a 2-car closed garage, and so I've only seen him coming and going. It's only one way in and one way out, so if he's backing out and going 5 miles an hour, I have to wait. Right. Anyway, as I pulled onto our road, clergy does not make this any easier, I'm just telling you. As I pulled into our road, I noticed that there were 5 or 6 cars parked at my neighbor's trailer with the big biblical sign, more than I'd ever seen at his home. And when I drove past, a woman was actually going into his house with a covered dish. So something had happened. And his family or his church were gathering to support him. When I passed the last parked car in front of his house, I saw that that same yard sign that was in my neighbor's yard was proudly also displayed in the back window of a large SUV. So, probably his church, gathering to support him, to offer their support and sustenance. I found out from another neighbor later when I inquired that his wife of over 50 years had died, and it was the members of his local rural Baptist church who were there. You see, difficult times in our lives often help us to discover where our connections truly are strong, where those threads that are woven together actually stay strong and don't come unraveled. There was a great article in the New York Times that many of you actually emailed to me over the course of the week, and it speaks directly about this. The article is on friendship and the friendship throughout our lives and the difficulty of making connection as we get older. The article cited 3 important factors for developing a connection: proximity, unplanned, repeated interactions, and a setting that allows people to let down their guard and confide in one another. Let me say that again. Proximity, unplanned, repeated interactions, and a setting that allows people to let down their guard and confide in one another. We need a third place of choice. Alongside our families and our workplace, we need a place where we can choose to connect, a place that is close in proximity and that offers a safe place to talk about our values and what matters to us in order to develop friendships and to make connections. Whenever I do a memorial service, people often come up to me and say, "Oh, I wish I'd been able to know their story and what mattered to them while they were still alive." You know, the answer is not to have your memorial service before you die. The answer is to find ways to have more meaningful conversations with the people who are around us right now, while we're all alive. There's no time like the present to reach out to someone in this congregation who you've wanted to know better. If you're an introvert and you need a little help, Barbara Prose, our assistant minister, directs a program called Friendly Souls, and you can volunteer to be assigned one of our members who can't make it to church regularly, who's seeking that kind of a connection. And in addition to building connection among those with similar values, we could also benefit from knowing our neighbors. There's this new movement in America to shift back to neighborhoods as the focal point for community resources. And schools are actually becoming these centers where communities can find healthcare screenings and food and clothing banks, adult literacy programs. It seems we're remembering that proximity aids in a program's success. Now, I've been working on a new program, a new project actually, all summer, that I believe could both help you deepen your connections to folks at church, but also strengthen your neighborhoods. See, we've divided the congregation into geographical groups, into neighborhood groups. So this year, I thought we might ease into knowing our neighbors a bit better by connecting you first to other members of the congregation. Now, as I've talked out this idea with folks, they've been stunned to find out that there are other All Souls members so close to them. So here's the idea. Local souls. It's a good name, isn't it? Local souls. Everyone gathers once a month on the second Tuesday from October through May. So guess where you're going to be on the second Tuesday of the month? At your local souls meeting. We're going to try not to compete with it with programming at the church. So you're there. That's where you're supposed to be. That's what you're doing. And it's for a potluck meal from 5:30 to 7:30. Beginning time, ending time. Get out of my house, come to my house, get out of my house. I'm just saying. But I'm looking for Local Souls hosts now. You can sign up at a table in Emerson Hall, actually, immediately after the service. And here's the responsibility. I provide you with the names, addresses, and phone numbers of the 15 or so member families that are in your direct area. And I've already divided up everybody, so believe me, it was no easy feat. But you offer to host the first potluck and contact them and invite them to your house. Or all 8 if you want, from October through May. But if you don't want to host all 8, that's fine. What you do is coordinate with the folks who show up to choose where you'll meet next. Another home, a recreational facility, an apartment party room, a school, I don't care wherever, but wherever. It's a potluck and you're supposed to meet somewhere that's geographically good, close. Just make sure that everyone on the list and me knows where the location is. See, I need to know because we have people who are joining the church all the time who are so excited to get to meet other folks in the church. And I believe it's this added bonus that we can introduce them to folks that live nearby. So connections are made because of proximity, unplanned repeated interactions, and a setting that allows people to let down their guard and confide in one another. So my hope is that local souls groups can meet the proximity need and that the church can be one of the places where they can have some unplanned repeated interactions, in addition to the fact that once you've met them, you're now going to recognize them at the closest grocery store or the park or the local gas station or Whole Foods when you're there. But the church can also act as a catalyst for folks who have below surface level conversation, right? To get off the top, skimming the top conversation. Because you'll know when you show up that the folks in the room care about freedom of belief and valuing diversity. They want to be in conversation about the things that matter. And if you don't sign up to host, I might be tracking you down anyway because I need a leader to step up in each group. But what a blessing and a new way of caring to know all the other All Souls members in your area. It's like another opportunity to think globally and act locally. And it might change the way you think about your own neighborhood. Now, my prayer is that having a network of local souls will also encourage you to get out and meet those folks who live on your street, who go to another church, or who go to no church at all. My neighbor, the one with the sign, the one whose wife died, he may not change his mind on gay marriage. And we will likely never agree or even talk politics. We may not ever even talk religion. But when I do the neighborly thing and follow that highest of commandments and reach out to my neighbor and show compassion in a time of need, I am more Christ-like. I am modeling the way that I would like to see the world be. And so Jill made 2 loaves of banana bread this morning. One is for someone in the congregation who has been struggling with a new and difficult diagnosis. And the other is for my neighbor with the sign that I will deliver on the way home. Amen. Amen.